Hi, everyone. Welcome to another blog post reading. This is my reading from the post I wrote on the 7th of October, 2022. Quelle Catastrophe. My uncle Wendell and I have an ongoing joke between us about his comical use of the expression, Quelle Catastrophe. It is French for what a catastrophe. After spending some time with him recently, I find myself saying it out of the blue whilst doing all manner of things. Most of them enjoyable, ironically, as I associate the term with our laughter and joyful moments spent together. Whilst I do laugh when I say it, I also realize that I am wired to believe that catastrophe is indeed what characterizes life. Even as I type this and smile, remembering how hilarious it is when he says it, I can feel just a little pull in my belly that says, it's all falling apart. Quelle catastrophe, quelle catastrophe. When I say it out loud and see what happens, I ask myself, do I really believe it? Some years ago, I purchased The Mind and the Brain, Neuroplasticity and the Power of Mental Force by Jeffrey Schwartz and Sharon Begley. It is now tattered and worn from my reading again and again about how malleable our brains are and how neuroplasticity works. The authors open a chapter titled Network Remodeling with a quote by John Milton in Paradise Lost. The quote is, "The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven of hell." End quote. The reverse is also true. The mind is its own place and can itself make a hell of heaven. Network in the chapter title refers to our neural networks, the implication being that we can remodel or rewire the neural networks in our brains, that our conditioned responses can be altered. This is what neuroplasticity is all about. If you are exploring the latest neuroscience related to evolutionary biology, we can agree that we have a tendency to live in a state of fight or flight. That is, we are consistently triggering our brain's limbic system and corresponding sympathetic nervous system in our interpretation of and response to life events. From an evolutionary perspective, our limbic system is not designed to help us reason through problems and weigh options whilst calmly sitting at a desk, lying in bed, waiting in traffic, or ruminating while shopping or cleaning, etc. There was no time for that when we were being hunted by other animals in the food chain, or other animals and tribes hunting and gathering like us, fighting for scarce resources, and so on. We are evolutionarily wired to, open quote, survive in an outdoor environment and to do so in nearly perpetual motion, end quote, Medina. However, in the world we have built for ourselves today, there is more than enough food for every human on the planet a few times over. The conditions which required us to be in perpetual survival mode no longer persist. Even as we enable ourselves to live beyond survival, and as language and domestic living emerged, we have continued to reinforce survival as a condition of our social and economic systems. Scarcity is actually built into our resource distribution systems. We have built into our social and economic systems the conditions required to keep our limbic system, our fight or flight responses triggered. We maintain social divisions and other ourselves, becoming each other's enemies for no evolutionary purpose at all. Similarly, our relationship to our natural environment is out of balance. We no longer use only what we need and live in balance with our ecosystems. Instead, we have pushed our ecological boundaries to their limits, taking natural threats to catastrophic levels, thus giving ourselves more reasons to justify our constant survival mode and perpetuating further inequality. We have created a physical reality which lines up with our old conditioning. Whilst on an individual level, conditions for fight or flight do exist, on a macro level, we can see that the majority of the situations that threaten us are socially and culturally cultivated. Where people are homeless and hungry, where we are in violent situations, it is most often at the hands of our own communities, families, economic and social systems, and governing institutions. Charles Darwin is often misinterpreted in the discussion on what tools are most needed for survival. Survival of the fittest is what is most often associated with Darwin and the notion that it is the strongest that survive. Actually, Darwin noted that it is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change, that lives within the means available and works cooperatively against common threats. End quote. I ask myself now, what is the common threat that we face? The answer is ourselves. This is the conundrum and why our evolution seems to be at a standstill. As we continue to reinforce through our cultural and social systems the wiring that tells us we are enemies fighting for scarce resources, we continue to create a world which reflects the same. We live with a sense of impending doom, and true to the notion of survival of the fittest, we do live in systems of dominance and subordination, which reflects this. Competition persists and cooperative living is typically rejected as a model of life. How to evolve? Neuroplasticity gives us the ability to rewire toward living in connection with ourselves, other beings, and our environment. We can start this process by reframing what we perceive as immediate threats to our survival. We can take notice of our thoughts and responses to events and repeatedly challenge ourselves about how we experience our fight or flight response on a daily basis. When we begin to carefully evaluate, we train our brains to recategorize events and enable proportional responses, not automatic fear-based ones, unless they are absolutely required. We would not assume first that we are surrounded by threats and enemies, but that threats, while they do occur, are not predetermined. We can make our default beliefs about the nature of life ones of connection and cooperation, and not competition and dominance. Thanks as always for supporting me. I will post the link for this full blog posting in the description of this video. Take care.